Pools and Surfaces Distributor presents our podcast series, Podcasting with Friends, with host Gamma Garcia. Creating synergy, creating the future.
Hi, welcome to today's podcast. Today we have two special guests, Mr. Sam Viana with Performance Link,
right,
and Miguel Chavez with Orenda Technologies. Thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks for being part of this podcast series called Podcasting with Friends.
Absolutely. Thanks
So
for having us. Yeah.
it is a pleasure that you guys are here today. So let's get started. You guys want to tell us a little bit about what Orenda does and what Performance Link does?
Absolutely. Orenda is a company that pays the bills selling products. However, we really strive to offer as much free education, as much free resources as we can afford. And this is one of the reasons why we're here today. We're here today to talk about startups and to talk about misconceptions and habits in the industry that have been the same for the last 34 years and that unfortunately need to change as of yesterday. Sammy here works in Miami, in Florida. He's a rep, or local rep. So if you have any questions or concerns, and if you need him to go to your pool, he'll gladly go and help you. And if you need personal training, particularly in Spanish, Eric Knight from Orenda is the one who covers our English training, but I am in the Spanish side. However, today we're being a little bit more versatile and doing both languages.
That's right.
That's great.
My name is Sam. I'm with Performance Link, and our job is to better complement the efforts of Miguel and Eric Knight and the rest of the team from Orenda, as well as various manufacturers and vendors in the swimming pool and outdoor living industry. So we cover the territory of the southeast portion of the country and the state of Florida as its own. It's like its own little crazy map, right? It's separated from the southeast of the country. I cover the territory from Vero Beach down to Key West. And we drive our efforts of marketing, sales, and engaging in this dialogue and taking advantage of these opportunities for our vendors and making it all make sense and wrap it together.
Awesome. That was a great introduction, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
My first question for today, when it comes to startup options for new plaster applications, where do you guys see the strongest opportunities in this industry?
This business? Well, I think things have been going the same way for the last 34 years, and it's really important to standardize, to get rid of misconceptions and just mostly educate people about what are the best resources, what are the best methods, and the consequences of doing certain methods, so then they can take better decisions and decide what aligns the best for their business or their particular interests. And that's what we're here for today. We want to just, reach out, educate, and share as much information as we know is true, that we've researched, that we spent a lot of time and efforts into just putting out there so you can learn more about water chemistry and the things that happen behind, hot starts or acid baths, acid washes, etc.
That's great. Great information.
There's a big opportunity in there. Going back to your initial question, I think we see the opportunity to drive education, like you were saying, Miguel, not only for the contractor, but for homeowners as well.
Exactly.
A lot of times
I
we try
agree.
and stay away from the homeowner, the less they know, the better, right? But
exactly.
Nowadays, you're on your cell phone, you're on social media, you get to read blogs, you go on Reddit, you go on Instagram. There's so much
and
available information that the days of the homeowner kind of just looking away, say, I got a nice pool, it's kind of over with. We get calls from homeowners and different people. So not only drive some education and show you some benefits for the contractor side, but sort of also educate that homeowner.
I agree.
Absolutely.
That's a great point you say, because from a customer point of view, they fill up the pool the next day, they want to get in. Mm-hmm. If they would understand that it's a 30-day process, that the cement has to cure, that the plaster has to cure, then they will probably be more patient with it. And if there's a little cosmetic floss here and there, the following day, they will know that that's going to tend to disappear after the curing process happens.
Absolutely. And to your point, that is correct. Everyone has access to a cell phone nowadays. So homeowners, they do their own due diligence
Yep.
on, doing some research about, preventing issues, what
Respect.
causes issues, about the products in the industry. So what you guys do in the industry, it brings a lot of value. I just want to tell you guys that, it does mean a lot to us as a distributor, and I'm sure that a lot of people out there appreciate what you guys do as a manufacturer and as a, rep group. So
Thank you.
that's truly appreciated.
Absolutely.
Miguel, Sam, you guys want to tell us a little bit about what's the proper chemistry in the water?
So here's the thing with water chemistry. It's been a misconception for so long, and they tell you that if you keep your pH between 7.4 and 7.6, they tell you, hey, if you keep your alkalinity between 80 and 120 parts per million, and you keep your calcium hardness between 200 and 400, which is the industry standard, what they recommend on your books, you'll be fine. You'll have no issues. You'll have no problems. But we know that that's not exactly the reality. They're gonna have different water in Florida. They're gonna have different water in Florida than what they do in California or Texas or even Mexico.
Yeah.
South America. Water is gonna be really different. So you can't really just rely on those three factors and pretend that your water equilibrium is gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And the whole story or the full circle is actually the LSI, the linear saturation index, and it's saturation index that measures the level of the saturation of calcium carbonate in your water. And we might wonder ourselves, why do we care about calcium carbonate in the water?
Right.
Well, turns out that plaster and cement and basically all the material that goes into your pool finish is made out of concrete. It's all
Right.
made out of Portland cement, which has a really high quantity of calcium, really high percentage of calcium. And calcium can dissolve. It's soluble in water, and once it comes in contact with water, it can turn in calcium oxide. It will turn into calcium hydroxide, which has a really high pH, which can then bring different problems during the startup process.
Correct.
Yeah, so the full picture, sorry, I diverged back a little bit, but the full picture is really the LSI. So you want to keep your LSI in equilibrium. If you have a low LSI, your water is going to be really aggressive. It's going to suck up calcium out of the walls. And if you have really high LSI, you're going to have an oversaturation, which means that scale is going to form. It's going to precipitate out of the water. And we really like to think about the analogy that, if you had a cup of water and your cup of water was made out of sugar, the walls were made out of sugar, and then you added water to it, what's going to happen to the walls? The walls will dissolve. So how can you prevent that issue? You add sugar to the water, your water is concentrated with sugar now, saturated with sugar, so it will not extract it from the walls. But now what happens when you add too much sugar in that water? The sugar goes straight to the bottom. It doesn't dissolve anymore. That's a really easy representation of what an oversaturation of the LSI is. What's another factor that's really important in your sugar? If you're having coffee and you want to add more sugar to it, you'll know it will go straight to the bottom. But if your coffee is hotter, if you have a higher temperature, it will dissolve more sugar.
Exactly.
It's the same thing. It applies reversible in the water. Colder water will tend to absorb more calcium. It will be more aggressive.
Correct.
Colder water will be more aggressive. So really we have 6 factors. We have the pH, we have alkalinity, we have calcium hardness, we have CYA or stabilizer, we have TDS or salt, and we have the temperature.
Right.
And you really have to look at all of the 6 factors and put the equilibrium formula to come down to realize if you really are within balance in your water or not.
Exactly. That's a great
It's important to keep
way of explaining it.
try and have that chemistry. When you say proper chemistry, it's such a broad thing to say. Everybody's got different opinions, and you've been in the industry for a long time, and we've always had people who are like stuck to the same plan. But I think all in all, water chemistry is going to be right when you have healthy swimmers, product that's not deteriorating inside the pool, or you don't have any like excess of calcium all over the place, or it
Exactly.
just looks like healthy water with healthy plaster and healthy glass tile. That's what water chemistry, I mean, is all about, and how we achieve that. We go to bat with it with the LSI.
And yeah, you know, Harold tells this story all the time. Harold, the owner of Orenda, he was in the industry, and he had a lot of issues, and he was keeping his pools on balance, you know, from what the industry told him. He was keeping his pH at 7.5. He was keeping his alkalinity at 80. His calcium hardness was where it was supposed to be. But yet he was still having all these sort of issues, all these sort of problems, and it just didn't make sense to him, you know, like, hey, my water's supposed to be balanced, but yet I'm still having problems. So then that's kind of what the thought process that triggered him to think further, to see the bigger picture, and to realize that, and the LSI has been a thing for decades now, you know? It's been in the industry, it's been disregarded and sort of ignored, unfortunately, but we didn't come up with it. Orenda didn't invent the LSI.
Yeah.
It's a thing. You can go online and Google it, and you'll realize that, holy cow, there's not, if I keep my pH at 7.5, my alkalinity at 80, and my calcium at 250, I might still have corrosive water.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's information that a lot of people that's been in the industry don't know about.
Right.
So it's,
they look at you and they're like, what's
yeah.
the LSI? And then the easiest way to kind of buy them into the idea is like, you know, the Taylor test kit, right? If you open it up, there's like a little wheel.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you kind of play with the wheel. That's
Yeah.
the LSI.
Basically, yeah. So that's very important
what it is, yeah.
information. Yeah, absolutely. Next question, guys. Being Orenda Technologies, the leader manufacturer and the point of reference when it comes to startup products, startup procedures, what is the preferred method about starting pools from Orenda?
Well, that's a great question. Just how I was just telling you about the LSI. A lot of people tend to think that the Orenda startup, or that the correct startup method, it's about just adding calcium. I was giving you the analogy of the water cup made out of sugar, so they're like, oh, as long as I add calcium, I'm gonna be fine. But really, it is about the LSI. If you have a balanced LSI, then you have no issues. You have no plaster dust. Because what happens, unfortunately, the methods that have been used in the industry is like, you're gonna use acid. You're gonna burn through that material. You're gonna burn through that calcium to get rid of defects. You're gonna get rid of cosmetic flaws. So when you fill up your pool, what they tend to do, the water is usually aggressive. So the water is aggressive, and it starts to pull out that calcium out of the plaster,
Right.
out of the material, starts to pull out the calcium, which then dissolves in the water and converts into calcium hydroxide, which has a really high pH. And that high pH will promote that plaster dust, which is a really popular term. Then the plaster dust, what they do is like, oh, dude, all you gotta do, you come the next day, you add a gallon of acid. But what that does is, the water was seeking the equilibrium, so it started to extract that material out of the wall until it reached the equilibrium. Because the water was corrosive, you needed calcium, because you needed that saturation, calcium carbonate.
And the most readily available calcium is coming from where?
From the plaster itself.
So this is what I say, every time you put water and plaster together, it's a constant battle for calcium.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, if you don't maintain the equilibrium that you're talking about, the plaster is going to win the battle.
Yeah.
And that's where you're going to start seeing, calcium buildups, all this, what they call stains, and cream and things like that. And not only that, when they go over with the acid, what's going to happen? They're going to overexpose the plaster.
The next day, and they realize that the pH is really high because of that calcium hydroxide got pulled out of the wall.
Right.
Raise the pH, and then they think that it's time to add acid, so they add acid, and then lowers the pH. Sucks more material out of the plaster.
Exactly.
Higher pH, and it's a constant thing for 30 days until it just disappears.
Exactly.
How much acid are you going to use on a regular startup, Acid's not really getting cheaper nowadays.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
No, it has become very expensive.
Yeah.
Not only that, but I hate to say it, but it also puts and it jeopardizes the health of these individuals out there, because the fumes that this muriatic acid generates, it's like, in my case, it's a concern, because I've been in the industry for a while, but it seems that that's not a topic that some of the individuals out there in maintenance and pool builders, they're not really focused into those hazards.
That's exactly. There's a lot of misinformation and a lot of lack of information. So that's just why we're here today. We're just trying to,
I think it's not really lack of information, but maybe just old practices that have just started at one point, and it was like, this is how you do it.
Became a habit.
To next generation, this is how you do it. The next generation, this is how you do it. And I think what our biggest challenge nowadays in the industry, in multiple parts of the industry, not just startups, is the education. Like, let's sit down here. We researched it. We thought it out. We've tried it. We've seen where our parameters are. Let's sit down and let's have the dialogue, and let's try something different. That's where I think our challenge is at. But thanks to Orenda and all of the research that they've done and all the time that they put into making these blogs and articles and trial and error, I think we're seeing a little bit more of success than failure.
Absolutely.
The proof is in the pudding when we make these practices.
I agree with that, Sam. So that's great info. Going back to my question, what is the preferred method? That you guys
preferred method is, and obviously we have a lot of information online, just like Sam was saying. We have procedures, guides, videos, articles. Now we have a course, a free educational course that guides you through the startup. How do you do the startup from day zero?
That's great.
When you show up to fill up the pool, basically what it comes down to is you want to fill up the pool with LSI water balanced, with LSI balanced water. So you're filling up that pool, you're preventing that extraction of calcium out of the plaster. You show up, you test the fill up water wherever it's coming from, whether it's coming from the tap or you have a truck that you're gonna use it to fill up the pool. You test that water and you wanna pre-treat it chemically before you put that water in the pool. And again, the LSI is your number one factor that you have to look at. It's not the calcium, it's not the alkalinity, it's a whole picture. So you look at the LSI. We've come up with this app which is completely free. You put it in the app and it's gonna tell you, hey, your water is aggressive, your water is oversaturated, and it tells you how much you need to add. So let's say you wanna raise your calcium levels from 80 to 250, so you have a perfectly balanced water. It tells you on the spot, hey, you're gonna need 40 pounds of calcium pre-dissolved to make your water happy, to make your water not hungry for calcium.
You wanna give it what it wants, make it recreational water from the first drop that it goes in there. So as it fills up, it's not going anywhere else for a different source. And our main goal, or how we know we achieved it, is a 100 or 98% cured plaster, where when you go back there the second day or the third day and you swipe a brush, you've got clear water. Now you're just worrying about maintaining that LSI. Maintaining that calcium level where it needs to be, maintaining that pH where it needs to be, rather than just constantly chasing pH and chasing pH and chasing pH and having all of these secondary effects to what goes on.
That's great info, guys.
So to answer your question, it is a very important process, and it's really a 30-day curing process. But the first day when you show up to fill the pool, you're gonna test your fill-up water chemistry, and you're gonna balance it. You're gonna adjust whatever it is that you need to adjust. People tend to have the misconception that it's a calcium startup, but it really is an LSI startup. You're gonna balance your LSI and you're gonna make it slightly positive, because due to the nature of the plaster and the way the material is created, with the water ratio, it's really hard to know how much calcium is gonna be pulling out of that plaster, out of the wall into the water. So you wanna be slightly positive, slightly oversaturated, slightly saturated with calcium carbonate, so you prevent that calcium loss from the plaster. So we at Orenda have made it easy because we have the startup barrel. The startup barrel, what it does is, as you're filling up your pool, you put the chemicals within the barrel.
And what is it? I'm sorry, it's a plastic barrel that you use?
It's literally a big 30-gallon. We have 30-gallon, 55.
Oh, that's great.
Different options for the size of the pool. And then you put your chemicals in the barrel.
Okay.
Calcium gets really hot when it's added to water, so you chelate it, you wait for it to cool down. And then once you're ready to fill up the pool, you start up the barrel as well, and the barrel starts to bring those chemicals into the water as the
By an overflow action. So it's got an exit with an overflow, and you'll see in our videos and our trainings that you've got your overflow in that water that's been pre-chelated and given it what it needs to fill up, so it doesn't start to look for it from other sources, which is the plaster. It starts to overflow into a vac hose with the perfect flow coming in from a water hose, and as it overflows, now you're getting a mixture of the water hose, but you've got what you need inside of that water as the pool is filling up.
So you pre-dissolve this calcium in the barrel.
Correct.
And do you use any other products in that solution, or do you put anything else in the barrel?
We recommend using SC1000, which is one of our very popular chemicals. It's a startup chemical, and what it does is it chelates the calcium. So, this is a very hard process, and it's really hard to exactly know how much calcium the plaster is going to need, or how much calcium is going to come out of the plaster. So in a given situation, maybe you mess up a little bit, either you went a little too aggressive, or you went a little too oversaturated with the LSI. The SC1000 is going to chelate that calcium, so it doesn't sit on your wall, and then later on it carbonates and creates a little bit of discoloration. If you have a black plaster, that's a big issue. So,
absolutely.
So it's like an extra layer of security for you in case things don't go so well in terms of chemistry. If there's a little bit of more chemistry, it gives you a little extra room. So we treat the water with the SC1000 and with the adjust that you need to make, whether it's calcium, or alkalinity, never the two at the same time.
Yeah, not that, but we do complement our calcium and our SC1000 with some muriatic acid.
Correct.
That's what helps it make it fall into solution. I don't think muriatic acid is our big enemy. Some people may perceive that. Muriatic acid is very important. It's needed, but I think at the right parameters.
If your tap water has a really high pH, you will add a little bit of extra acid, but in the barrel itself, the muriatic acid will neutralize, because SC1000 has a little bit of high pH. So you really only need 12 ounces for every quarter of a gallon of SC1000.
Quarter of a gallon.
So it's a few ounces to neutralize the pH and to make sure that your water is going to stay balanced in the LSI, which is where you want it to be from hour one, from the first hour that you put in the water. Exactly, your water is already balanced. You're preventing that. You're watching for the longevity of your pool, of your surface, and you're preventing that damage that usually happens within the first 5 days, within the first 3 days.
Right. Is there a ratio that you guys recommend? Is there something that they need to know out there as far as how much? You already said that acid could treat up to how many gallons you guys said?
So you use 32 ounces of SC1000 for every 10,000 gallons in your pool.
Which is a quart.
How much calcium would you add into the barrel?
It depends on your tap water.
So it depends on the
readings of what's coming out of the tap water. I've been to some properties, and we do a lot of on-site training. So if anybody's interested, you can absolutely reach out, and we'll go out there and we'll support you. We'll train you. We'll show you how to get this done. But I've been in properties where it's only 30 pounds of calcium that needs to be added. But just 2 weeks ago, I was at a property where the water coming out the tap was at 20.
Oh, wow.
That's really low.
Yeah.
We needed to get all the way up to about 280
Exactly.
parts per million. And I think I ended up doing about 60 pounds of calcium. Into the barrel.
And that gets hot.
And it gets hot. And it's really why we use that barrel, because it's not because we want to sell more product or anything like that.
Right.
We really just want to drive education first and foremost, but right behind that, we also want to promote safety. If you put 60 pounds of calcium inside a regular barrel or just a bucket, you're probably going to melt through it.
It might melt.
And now you got a big problem in your hands. You got a brand new pool.
Yeah.
And calcium just going all over the place on a fresh deck. That's a nightmare. That's something that we don't even want to think about. But with our barrel, it's got the strength of the plastic in it that can withhold that.
Oh, that's great info.
Yeah.
That's great info.
Reach out, touch faith.